Welcome to The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky, a weekly podcast that breaks down politics, policy, and current affairs. I'm Becky Scher.
And I'm Michael Brodkorb. We are here today with an episode covering two important topics. First, we interview Richard Marianos. Richard is a senior law enforcement consultant and has served over 27 years at the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. He currently teaches courses for law enforcement executives at Georgetown University. We are speaking to Richard about all things vaping. He is currently in St. Paul for a conference where he is leading a conversation about the ongoing battle against illegal vaping products. With Richard, we will break down how he got into this role and the failures around vape regulations. We will discuss flavored products and break down how they target kids. Second, we're going to focus on a concerning situation surrounding a DFL-endorsed candidate for the Minnesota legislature. At a recent convention in House District 12B in Douglas County, the local DFL party endorsed a man by the name of Judd Hoff. Hoff has a history of troubling behavior targeting incumbent Republican Representative Mary Franzen. He has publicly harassed Franzen, has dug through her garbage, protested outside her home, and has gone so far as to move into the home directly across the street from Franzen. Hoff also has a stunning and disturbing criminal background. In 2020, Hoff wielded a 23-inch machete against someone, for which he was later convicted of a felony second-degree assault. Today, Becky and I will break down how someone with this background can get endorsed by a major political party in the state. We will dig into his background further and detail how troubling and dangerous this situation truly is. And then we'll break down recent reaction from other Democrats and Republicans in the state. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Thank you for joining us today, Richard. We are excited to hear a little bit more about you and a little bit more of your area of expertise. So can you start by just telling us a little bit about how you got to the point where you are, your background, your work history, and a little bit about what you've been doing over the last few decades?
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to get this message out. I think it's extremely important for the community, the parents, for law enforcement to understand what the real threat is and how these vape products are creating an epidemic amongst our children and really a disruptive environment. Quick background on myself. I retired after 27 years with ATF. I was blessed to become the assistant director. Not that I'm a subject matter expert by any means, but I had great people throughout the years that worked for me and made myself look very good. Subsequently, throughout my career, I got a master's degree at the University of Colorado, and I began teaching, where I'm teaching now at Georgetown University. And that's where this plays in a little bit, because I've used in case studies on international organized crime to talk quite a bit and have my students work on criminal tobacco trafficking, and right now specifically on Chinese organized crime, manufacturing, distributing these vape products throughout the United States that are making a tremendous amount of money on the backs of our children.
So I want to get into the history of this a little bit because I think it's something that I know a little bit about here and there. These obviously came up over the last 5-10 years, really came into popularity with Juul, and Minnesota had a big lawsuit with Juul. And I've known and read about different bans and different implementations of restrictions, especially for restrictions when it comes to kids and targeting children. But can you talk to us a little bit about more of the kind of failed attempt by the FDA to regulate this market?
I would be glad to. Originally, the vape product was designed as a tobacco harm reduction device. It was to get people away from combustible cigarettes, which every study on the planet Earth understands that it is detrimental to someone's health. Even when the Surgeon General warnings of the 60s came out, America was advised, don't smoke. So these products, when they came into the forefront, the original idea was to get people away from combustibles. Some products perhaps targeted youth at the time that was manufactured by U.S. industry, and subsequently the FDA got involved. And what they did is put together a pre-marketing agreement where they evaluated by United States industry, by the tobacco companies, on what was considered a tobacco harm cessation device and that could be sold under FDA standards. Currently, there's between 20 and 25 different devices that the FDA has approved that are manufactured by companies in the United States to get people away from combustibles. Good thing. In the midst, what has happened is the Chinese organized crime groups have realized that it's such a huge market that they have began to prey on not first the population by creating flavored devices or devices marketed as gummy bear, Captain Crunch, Tutti Frutti, specifically designed to addict kids or young adults to these devices.
Discuss a little bit the manufacturing. These are manufactured in China and what has been labeled kind of Vape Valley. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. Right now, the Xinjiang Valley in China, which is considered by members of the industry and by international law enforcement as the Vape Valley, it is almost like what I would equate to Detroit is to General Motors, where they have sophisticated factories where they make billions upon billions of these products, test them and evaluate them for their addictive qualities, and then ship them illegally to the United States. This is not something just to brush off. What I think it's important for your listeners and for the community to understand is the Chinese Communist Party and Chinese organized crime right now is making close to $300 billion on the backs of our kids. And what frustrates myself and many people that are working this issue is we consider China our number one national security threat. And if we know and have identified where they're gaining illicit, illegal assets to the tune of $300 billion, why we're not trying to put a better full court press to stop them is unbeknownst to me.
How are Chinese vape products getting into the United States?
Through many ways. They come into ports, they come in through airports, like O'Hare in Chicago is one of the biggest air destinations. They're the port of Los Angeles. They're coming in through shipping lanes into the upper eastern seaboard, but they're also coming in through disguises. And that's what is frustrating law enforcement is we're doing an excellent job of protecting our country from large amounts of narcotics through protecting ourselves from biological, radiological things coming into the United States in our war on terror. But the bad guys know this, and they're using other means to bring these things in that cannot be detected, and they're shipping them through what I want to say is covert operations. And in many times, the threat to national security is paramount, and that's what needs our biggest dedicated efforts. So if you were to talk to a member of U.S. Border Protection, they're going to look at what is a threat and what isn't. So if they're shipping things through, let's say, stuffed animals, like that we've seen on TV before, that they've shipped in narcotics in the past, other criminal organizations, or TV boxes, or whatever it may be, that's going to take less of a priority in terms of what needs to be done. And that is what they're exploiting this at by bringing them in. They come in to distributors, they go to retailers, and the retailers are selling a product that right now is 100% illegal. It's a criminal product by the FDA. And that is the challenging part for communities, that though it's a violation of federal law, it's very hard to enforce because many places don't have the authority to enforce that.
So you're laying out a scenario by which vape products, so manufactured in China, in this vape valley that are targeting our kids, are being imported into the United States illegally, correct? And they're ending up on the shelves and being sold then legally.
100% illegally. And in defense to the FDA, they don't have the resources nor the money to go out there to every one of these shops because they're everywhere and begin to do the accurate inspections to take it off the shelves, to find, arrest, or whatever is necessary to deter this behavior. And it is going wild. Some of the things that are becoming successful, I don't want to be the complete bearer of doom and gloom or the ER of your show right now. But what I'd like to share is many states now are developing their own vapor directories. And I think this is a very successful strategy because it is allowing states to take matters into their own hands and to use their resources to identify what is FDA approved, what is illegal, and allowing, let's say, like in Oklahoma, where they have tax investigators that can go to these shops, seize these products, put some of these stores that are preying on our children out of business, and creating a safer environment. Are we going to stop this? We need to be realistic. It's like narcotics. There is a great demand out there. But what we need to do is also understand we need to begin to deter it. We need to put together a program of education, which is not out there right now. It has to be very similar to DARE. We have to educate our parents, our school resources, our counselors, our law enforcement, and we need to take strict and stringent law enforcement action against these individuals that are preying on our kids. This is our number one greatest asset in this country right now is our children. We cannot have them become victims anymore to a foreign government, a national security threat that is making money hand over fist against what we cherish the most.
Now, it sounds like there are just is a plethora of issues concerning this, right? So we've got the illegal Chinese imports. We've got these products that were maybe originally intended to help people stop smoking cigarettes that are now becoming more addictive and an issue there. And then the targeting of children. So I know $1 million question here, and we'll get into kind of what some states are doing, but how do we, if we're focusing on the kids, in addition to, I remember back in the day of cigarettes and Joe Camel and all of these advertisements, and obviously things were done to tailor that and make that not targeting children. When we come to kids, I have an almost 2-year-old, Michael's got some teenage kids. What can be done to make sure that these kids are not drawn into this? This is the cool thing, the popular thing. It tastes good. They can do it without getting caught. How do we address that?
First, we have to understand as a public in general that the industry is not the enemy. Who is the enemy here? Okay. And focus our resources on not the tobacco manufacturers or the companies in the United States, or even if it's outside the industry that's making a safe product that's been approved, but who the enemy is and what they're doing. Second, we have to create a situation where our school resource officers have to engage. And the hard part right now since 2020 is we've cut back on law enforcement issues and we've taken many school resource officers out of the schools. The ones that are in schools are now burdened, and I say burdened with spending sometimes 35 hours out of their 40-hour week handing out FAPE referrals. They can't concentrate on cyberbullying anymore. They can't concentrate on perhaps gun threats in the schools, fights, narcotics, all the things that we want them to do in terms of serving, protecting, where they're regulating and harassing. But this can't not be fought out of one front. This is a multiple front war that needs to be brought on to address this challenge. And there are many entities that have to be involved in it. And you'll hear parents saying it's just vape. It's not just vape. Some of these devices contain 5,000 puffs. There's a product out there, and I don't even want to give it the satisfaction of advertising for it, but contains 5,000 puffs, where some of these young adults have puff on these things all day long, and it's like ingesting cartons and cartons of cigarettes. So the nicotine addiction, by the time they go to school, is distracting. They can't concentrate on their schoolwork. They're a disruption to the classroom. They're a disruption to the administrators, the teachers, the school resource officers. And until we take aggressive action against these perpetrators, this will continue. This is not something we can take lightly and just blow off that it's a phase. This is not a phase. It is a huge marketing campaign. If you go on social media to see what the Chinese government has put together, if you go on a website made in China, it will give you thousands and thousands of different products that these illicit distributors can have directly shipped to them that we need to be putting a stop on. We need to stop that site from being brought into our computers. We need to go after these distributors and retailers that are illegally selling it. And the sad part is we have very good community people out there that have said, okay, I understand. FDA says bad. We got to get away from it. We're not going to sell it. There's been some very responsible retailers, but there's others that realize the FDA doesn't have the resources. They realize that the odds of me getting a $5,000 ticket, I can afford it because I sell $40,000 of this product a week. We have to take action. We cannot sit. And the time is right now to begin a program rather than wait till it's too late. And I say sometimes my frustration exists With the United States government, to include the three-letter agencies, it takes them 3 hours to watch 60 Minutes. We need them to get up, to stand up to the plate and address this problem immediately. It is not going to go away, and it's going to create more disruption as ever before.
Richard, I live in Eagan, Minnesota. There are vape shops, I believe, in Eagan. The scenario you're describing here is that an owner of a vape shop, and I'm not passing any disparagement on any of the vape shops or that are in Eagan, but it is what you're saying is someone could go online, figure out that these are the products that they want to sell, bring them in and ship them directly to their store and sell them. And the only reason why that kind of process would be stopped is either the ethics or morals of the shop owner in determining that they don't want to sell these types of products, or someone coming in and doing a spot check on what type of products they're selling. Is that the only safeguard that's currently stopping these types of products from being sold? It's shop owners having the ethics and morals not to sell them and someone catching them doing it. Is that it?
Right now, you've pretty much identified the problem. The FDA is, because of their lack of resources and their inability to gather the money necessary, and it's not an indictment against the FDA, excuse me, but it is as much as they need the resource and the money, and many of these states need these directories to go out there and take care of the problem by themselves. There's just not enough investigators or regulators that can go to all these vape shops. If I was king of the world, and I say this when I teach my class and we work through different scenarios, how would you handle it? Like one of the papers that I had my students write, that if you were in charge of the FDA over this initiative, how would you handle it? One of the biggest ways is to take some of that federal money, bring it to the communities, and go to groups inside your law enforcement entity or your community groups, whether it's your liquor license enforcement, but go to your licensing establishments and do license checks and have that ability immediately, that if they're selling the products, to find them, maybe second time a criminal offense, third time a death penalty, to take the license and put them out of business, because these are 100% criminal contraband, and the owners need to have some fear of deterrent. They need to realize that, okay, if I don't play by the rules, I will face a fine. Deterrence works here, but it has to be established. And right now, the mechanisms are not in place correctly to jump on this right now. We're right now in the early phases. We can begin to do it, but we cannot sit on our hands. It must be done. Just like you were saying, Mike, your kids, I'm sure, have given you tons of information on how much of a problem this is in schools. If you talk to any counselor, any principal, the majority of them will say, this is our biggest concern. What was guns 20 years ago is now vapes being sold because of the money these kids can make selling them out of backpacks, or the extreme use, or the devices they're buying to use them in schools.
It was in preparation for this, I was looking at some of the states that have been working on or implementing. It looks like Utah is considering a ban. There's a dozen or so states that have some sort of ban, either banning online sales or flavors. What's your take on how things are progressing? Is it coming along fast enough and organically state by state? Or is this something we should expect to see more bans from more states as we move forward?
I think we will see more, but we need to see them quicker. Some problems in some states are different entities that are saying that industry is behind this, that industry wants to put them out of business. That has nothing to do with it. Industry selling a product that's regulated and approved by the FDA. If these Chinese products were regulated and approved by the FDA, they would be allowed to sell. They can't, because they're marketed to children, they're dangerous, and they're illegal. And that's what people need to understand. And that becomes what I want to say, a fork in the road, where the wrong people are blamed behind the wrong narrative. Okay. If we need to concentrate on criminal activity here, this is where it points to. It's like a lightning rod to all this controversy. It'd be very easy if, let's say, the group in the St. John Valley and the Vape Valley, one manufacturer, let's call it Dopey Bar, were come out and it passed the PTM agreement, the PTMA, agreement, then that would be allowed to be sold as a tobacco harm reduction device. But right now, none of their products are approved. They're all illegal. And I think that's what we need to concentrate on. This is not an effort by big tobacco, small tobacco, medium tobacco, cigar shops. This has nothing to do with that. This has to do with criminals making money on our kids.
And the reality is that getting these kids, the name of this is bubblegum. The name of these are cotton candy. These are targeted towards kids. They're targeted towards kids. And again, it's just, I feel like we're growing up in a much more difficult time. It's just more difficult time. And it's just a challenge right now for kids. And this is just another added dynamic of kids growing up. And this is something, it's also another way to discuss issues related to the border. Border is one of the top issues that's going to be in this election cycle. And this is another way to look at problems going on at the border.
And the borders are porous in some cases, in some areas. And also they figure out other ways to get these products through. Our southwest border is one example where they're bringing things through the same routes that they use to bring in narcotics. Why reinvent the wheel? It has been successful. It's still successful. It's bringing record amounts of fentanyl and methamphetamine. Let's bring in vapes, and they're doing it. There's money to be made, and where there's money to be made, Mr. Criminal finds it.
Correct.
Last thing I have is I just wanted to touch on, as I was reading some of these articles, some of the speculation or concerns that, folks opposing bans have claimed. One I saw that, does a ban help big tobacco because it's taking away some of those safe ways for people to stop smoking? Is this a personal responsibility thing? Where Michael and I come from partisan Republican backgrounds. Is this something that government needs to be involved in? What are your answers to people that look at either of those things, that we don't need more government bans, or this is just going to turn back and swing back to benefit big tobacco?
I don't think it's benefiting big tobacco, because if you look at what they manufacture and sell that has already been approved, they're not selling gummy bear. None of these products we're talking about today were manufactured with the Simpsons cartoon characters on there specifically designed the kids. They're not manufacturing hoodie sweatshirts where you could suck on a vape through your eyelids to hide and conceal yourself. There's another products that are being manufactured by organized crime for
Really?
these kids. Yes. What we need to understand is bipartisan, whether it's Republican or Democrat, it needs to be taken seriously. And some of my frustration right now is there's a menthol ban out right now, which has been a legal product for 70 years, an adult product that the administration is looking at putting a ban against, when this is far greater threat to national security and our children than anything before. They need to wake up, all politicians, and prioritize this and understand this is more important than TikTok, a menthol ban, or whatever 5 minutes of fame they're going to get standing in front of a microphone, and concentrate on what the American people, the parents need, the cops need, the teachers needs. Put our needs first, please.
Richard, you have put a very fine point on a subject that I had not known enough about prior to you coming on the podcast. And I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to talk with you today, for Becky and I to speak to you, talk with you, and follow this issue. As a parent, if there's one thing that I think Becky and I try to do, particularly as parents, is anytime we have an opportunity to talk on a subject that impacts kids, we're always going to do it. And so what you're doing out there is important. And the work that you're doing is important. Where can people follow you to learn more about this issue and more about your work that's going on?
That's great. And I'm so glad you give me the opportunity, because myself, some students, there's a counselor that has put together a website. It's called www.illegalvapes.com. It's updated every day with stories around the country, some that are successful, some that aren't working that well. Also studies, but it's particularly targeting educators, school resource officers, parents. And it gives people the opportunity to see what is going on around the country and what is important in this arena to bring the subject matter to its forefront. If I can ask your listeners to do anything, is to please step up to the plate. Write op-eds, contact your local legislators, engage with your parents groups, your counselors, your administrators, and advise them of how important this issue is. Share your podcast with every one of them. Put them on your email list and blast it out there. It's the right thing to do. I'm not selling anything here except falling into a situation of one of the biggest threats of national security making money on our kids' backs. And we need to do something, and we need it now.
Richard, I want to thank you so much for being here today and for taking time to talk with us. What you're doing is so important. And on behalf of 3 kids myself, I want to extend my sincere appreciation for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor, and I look forward to working with you guys again on Sunday.
Becky, we just got scared by Richard Marianos and scared us straight on the subject of vapes in our children in this country. Your thoughts?
It's just kind of wild how much it has gained in popularity over the last few years. I feel like you walk down the street and you can just smell all of it. It's very apparent what it is, right? You can smell cotton candy and, these what smell and I would assume taste horrific, but smell is just so fake and so smelly. But we hear it and see it everywhere. And so it is really concerning. Obviously, my son is hopefully very far removed from any substance of this sort, but to see how available it is and how illegally available it is. So we've got both the legal and illegal components of this. We've got the targeting to the kids. There's just so many concerns here. I did ask at the end a little bit about the personal responsibility because obviously as a strong Republican, I don't always love government involvement in these kind of things, but when it is becoming such a epidemic amongst the youth and all of these potential health dangers for them that we don't even really know all of what can come from it because it is so new and not regulated as well as so many other things in our world. It's really troubling. So I think it was really impressive that I always like to be able to talk to somebody that kind of forces me to dig into these topics a little bit more. And so grateful that Richard and his team reached out and it was a good conversation.
I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to speak with him. Again, though, it just brings up another thing as parents we need to be concerned about. But I'm so thankful that Richard is out there fighting this good fight and working to keep as best he can our kids safe, my kids safe, and other kids safe from these types of dangerous products. It gets to another example, which we've talked about in a different way, about border security. And it's something that is going to be a very significant topic this election cycle. And we're mostly concerned, this country, the way the lens is through is people coming over the border illegally into this country from other parts of the world. Here we have products that are getting to our children. And it's just as important and in many ways can be more impactful, unfortunately, this influx of illegal vapes and products that are designed and manufactured in Vape Valley in China. And so there's always something that parents have to be concerned about. This is another thing, but Richard, it did just a good job, I think, of explaining the concerns, describing the limitations that the federal government has, FDA and states have in terms of enforcing this. And once again, I think it's the message of parents need to take a much more active role. Plus, government needs to get together and start taking these problems seriously. And there's so many of these types of things that happen. I'm so thankful that Richard, again, as you articulated, Richard and his folks reached out and we were able to have him on. We'll make sure to link to information that his group is putting out that they produced and he and some of his fellow students have done. And we hope to have him back on other subjects. But I do hope that this situation improves and this podcast episode can be an example or a teaching tool for parents and others and policymakers to start taking this issue more seriously and addressing some of the concerns that Richard is talking about.
Absolutely agree.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Becky, we're going to spend some time today talking about endorsements and particularly endorsements of what some would argue, and I think we would both argue, questionable candidates for the legislature, and that we've encountered this. We've talked about this year of our podcast about some of these candidates that are running and some are actually getting endorsed. And unfortunately, the latest example we have is a gentleman by the name of Judd Hoff, who is running against Representative Mary Franzen up in Alexandria. Judd Hoff was endorsed recently by the DFL party up in that part of the state, 12B, which is mostly, I think, part of Douglas County. up in Alexandria. And Judd Hoff has a very disturbing record, a very disturbing record. And Becky, you've reviewed the record. I've looked at the record. In your experience, potentially one of the worst backgrounds of a candidate that you're aware of?
Yes, absolutely. On the criminal side, I think we do see this every once in a while. Usually, in my experience of ones I can remember, it's maybe like a tax lien, a DWI, or like disorderly conduct or drunk in public, or not minimizing any of those things. But it's on the scale when considering Judd Hoff on the minor side. This is alarming. Alarming
Yes.
for anybody to interact with, but let alone this now being an endorsed DFL candidate.
Yes, and we're going to get into more of the details, but I just wanted to get a sense where you were, because this was one of the worst, if not the worst, that I've seen. And we've talked about a lot of bad examples before. We've also talked about a lot of good things, but without a doubt, the totality of what was in this man's background, both what he's done that's documented in the court file and other behavior, is just really appalling. And Representative Franzen had posted, I think on Saturday evening, that Judd Hoff had been endorsed. And she has put out a number of posts on social media about who Judd Hoff is and some of the things in his past and some interactions that she's had with him. We should set the table a little bit that what are the qualifications to run for office? Generally, you have to be, let me just pause for a second. I'm going to look that up very quickly because I realize I don't know.
I think it's like a filing fee, and legislatively, I think you have to live in the district. Congressionally, you don't.
Let's distinguish between legal qualifications, someone who's legally can run, and whether people have in their background the type of qualities and leadership examples and life experiences that we would make them think are good, that would have the potential to be good legislators. I think in this instance, we're talking about not legal qualifications, because to run for the legislature in Minnesota, you have to, members of the House of Representatives and the Senate must be qualified voters of the state, be 21 years of age, and must resided 1 year in the state. In addition, state legislators must have lived 6 months independently preceding the election in the district of which they are elected. So what that means is you have to live in the district that you're going to run 6 months prior to the election. You have to be 21 years of age, and you must have lived in the state for at least 1 year prior. Those are the requirements to run. So Judd, by all accounts, meets the legal qualifications to run. And other candidates that we've discussed, we talked about Rich Stidger, who was attempting to run against Representative John Koznick. He met the legal qualification to run. We're not talking about that today. We're talking about an individual, as we go through some of this discussion on him, has a very disturbing background in particularly what he's done to Representative Mary Franzen directly. Let's get into that a bit. Representative Mary Franzen lives in Alexandria. She has been a very active member of the legislature. She is what I would consider to be an absolutely solid Republican. She is a real firebrand Republican. She is willing to she's just a very quotable member of the legislature. She is someone who can tackle both policy and politics. She is an absolute flamethrower when it comes to things sometimes. And I think that there's no question that I think that her style of politics, in terms of how passionate she is on behalf of Republicans, messaging on behalf of Republicans, and her desire and willingness to want to see Republicans win in every corner of the state, has made her a target, independent of what are the demographics of her district and the political nature of the district. This is a very strong Republican seat. And so by no means do I think that Judd Hoff is going to be successful in defeating Representative Mary Franzen. But the behavior that I've learned in the last few days about what this man has done directly and specifically to Mary Franzen as a person is just appalling. And so Representative Franzen went out and noted that this Judd Hoff had been endorsed recently, and she shared some articles on social media about some things in his past, some criminal things in his past. Most disturbing is that Judd Hoff has multiple criminal convictions and has had multiple incidents in his past where he has brandished a machete. He has been charged and was convicted of a second-degree assault related to brandishing a machete in 2020. I think he was convicted in 2021. He has some damage to property convictions. He has a disorderly conduct, a criminal disorderly conduct offense. So he has a criminal damage to property, contempt of court going back all the way to 1991. Judd Hoff has, by every available measure, an extensive criminal background. And some of the incidents involving his criminal behavior involve felony level assault with items like machetes. In fact, there's a couple examples in his criminal past involving incidents with machetes. If you're not familiar with what a machete is the tool of trade of Jason from Friday the 13th. Okay. So it's not a light knife. It's a weapon that is, if brandished, is meant to intimidate and to have some bit of, it has, I don't know. And again, I'm not trying to diminish the significance of it, but brandishing a machete or bringing out a machete to a fight or in type of any environment is not a de-escalation. Not to say that someone isn't in a situation where they may need a machete. I'm a conceal and carry permit holder. I don't want to deny anyone the opportunity by which to defend themselves using a machete if they need to, or a firearm legally, okay? But this is an individual who has his method of choice or his weapon of choice in a couple instances seems to be a machete. This is who the DFL endorsed. And so it appears that his criminal conduct was known by the delegates up in that area, correct?
Yeah, very often before I have gone through the process a lot with on the Republican side, being part of a party officer, working for the state party. I assume the DFL side is relatively similar, where the delegates who have made themselves known that are going to the endorsement typically go through a nominating committee who ask them questions, do an interview. Oftentimes I know on the Republican side, is there anything in your past that would be concerning or troubling or look bad for the local party or for the state party? Do you have a criminal record? Typically is on there. And very often there are independent searches of public records to see what is out there. So in this case, after this endorsement was made public and some of these issues were made public largely thanks to your Twitter feed, it did appear that one of the local DFL party officers or somebody involved had contacted I believe it was the Alexandria Echo Press, who wrote an article, and they said that this was known by the delegates. This was known by the nominating committee, and they proceeded anyway, which is troubling.
Which is very troubling. Now, again, let's separate because we break things down on this podcast. There are legal qualifications to run. By all accounts, Judd has met the legal requirements to run for the legislature. Okay? He's met the legal requirements. But there's also a side that should say does he have the type of life experiences that he would bring that would make his life experiences one that service in the legislature would be something that he would succeed at? Are his life experiences such that serving in the legislature would be a net benefit to the area? And I have to tell you that their criminal records, first and foremost, a number of people have had criminal records and have been elected to higher office. George W. Bush had a DWI. Dick Cheney had too. I have a DWI in my past. I'm not seeking elective office at this time. I may at some point, but I'm not seeking at this point elective office. But those type of life stories are a part of those are life stories that a lot of people have. And again, these aren't legally disqualifying things, but this is about the judgment. It's about the judgment of the activists and the delegates when they're making the selection on who to endorse. I would say to you, without any hesitation, that what appears in Judd's background criminally, just in the criminal file alone, and I want to take this somewhat strategically, what appears in the criminal file is disqualifying in and of itself. Now, I'm not saying it legally is disqualifying him from running. Every election cycle, independent of the party endorsement processes, there are people who file for office. Those are candidates. There's people that do it on a very regular basis that bypass the party process and choose to run. In Minnesota, particularly for the major party candidates, a Judd could have filed as a Democrat and just chosen to run and bypass the endorsement process. He went through the endorsement process. And I would say, yes, he meets the legal qualifications to run, but based on what's in his criminal past, I would not have voted to endorse him just based on what's in his criminal past alone.
And I completely agree. And I think one of the things that is most concerning is because I think there's two things that that are troubling when you look at this from the endorsement side of things is, again, that nominating committee, very often then there's a nominations chair who at the convention will come forward and say, these are the people we spoke with. Judd Hoff recommended. They'll give either recommended or qualified, or not recommended, not qualified, or qualified with concerns, or different things. So there are ways for them to give the full picture to the delegation, and let them make their decision. I don't know that happened here. I don't know what level it was shared. But the thing that, as you mentioned, there are a lot of people who are able to learn from mistakes and go on. And we've talked to a number of them and had those conversations. It doesn't appear that this is one of those situations. It doesn't. I
Correct.
haven't seen anything from Judd saying, I have made mistakes. I have learned from them. I believe that I'm a good steward and would be a good servant for the people of Douglas County and 12B because X, Y, and Z. There's nothing that we've seen. As somebody, he seems to be very active on social media. It doesn't appear that there's anything of that out there, that he's taken any accountability and acknowledged his wrongdoings and wants to change the path forward. That's the issue I see here.
Correct. And as you noted, we have spoken to a number of people on this podcast. And I've said to you before, Becky, if there's one subject that I could do a podcast entirely on, it's about people who have had challenges, made mistakes in their life, who have redeemed themselves and are now looking to do just good things. And I don't even want to name some of the people that we've interviewed where we've discussed that, because I don't want to connect the good work that they're doing in any way to Judd. But I will say to you is that is a subject that is something that we've talked about before. And I believe very strongly, as someone who's here today, because of the good graces of others and second, third, and fourth chances, I believe in second and third, fourth chances. Trust me, I have needed them in my life. But what I do see in his past is what I'm failing to see right now is an acknowledgement of his past, as you articulated, is that he has not, by any account, I haven't seen an example that he's articulated, that he's learned from these past mistakes, that these violent incidents, some of them involving a machete, are still not who he is today. That's what's so concerning to me. And it's just very poor decisions on the part of any local party. And again, in this particular instance, we're talking about the DFL party, but the Republicans, they cannot throw stones in this matter with any moral authority, simply because they also have had issues with candidates that have sought elected office, have tried to get endorsed by a party office. And this is a problem in both parties. But Judd has risen to the front right now, a combination because of his criminal record, which is extensive, which is available on my Twitter feed, which I will link to in the description of this podcast episode when we release it. It is extensive. And again, I want to separate. I'm going to be very careful on how I say this. He has met the legal qualifications, but I think we are both of the opinion that based on just his criminal record alone, coupled with his fact of lack of contrition, lack of acknowledgement of it, or his explaining and conveying any explanation, apology, or any type of atonement for what he did, that he understands that he did was wrong, that would make him unendorsable, in my opinion, just based on his criminal record. Correct?
Correct. And one thing I want to just paint the picture a little bit of this machete. It's a 23-inch machete. That's almost 2 feet long. This is a very serious weapon that he was doing. And I just needed to share that because it's just astounding to me of the depths of that.
And again, I'm not trying to make light of it, but when I say Jason from Friday the 13th, that's his weapon of choice in a lot of those movies, is a machete. And to think that someone was using it, as Judd attempted to do in downtown Alexandria, is just astounding that people looked at that file. And again, as we've made clear, the issue here is the lack of contrition coupled with the record. I don't even know, to be very honest with you, if he had done a full narrative apology, that I would have voted to endorse him. I think that the record there is so detailed and extensive, going back from, we have convictions starting in we have contempt of court charges in 91, all the way up to convictions in 2000 and 2021. So a span of 30 years where this man has had, where he's been in trouble with the law. And so pretty difficult, I think, to frame up appropriately and explain just for the case of an endorsing convention, your criminal record for 30 years and expect that to be enough to get you endorsed. That's where I think the problem is. Now, we're going to deal with the most serious and disturbing aspect of Judd Hoff's behavior, which is Judd Hoff has had multiple incidents involving, I think, fair to say, violating the space of Representative Mary Franzen. And again, Mary Franzen is a duly elected member of the legislature. It's immaterial to me in any way who Mary Franzen is, what she does, and how she approaches her job. The only reason why I wanted to explain a little bit of her background, in that I think she's in a safe Republican district, she is a strong messenger on behalf of Republican issues, and she is very quick to message both on politics and policy where she feels Republicans are doing well and where Democrats are coming up a bit short. That's absolutely her. And so I'm explaining that just so our listeners understand, but Mary Franzen has done nothing, zero, zilch, to deserve this. It doesn't matter if she was the most partisan member of the legislature, if she's a rhino Republican, or she's a far-right Republican. No member of the legislature, and in this particular instance, we're talking about it through the lens of partisanship of a Democratic candidate targeting a Republican candidate. But I'm also going to say to you, no legislator, male, female, either party, deserves an opponent who is engaged in this type of behavior. I don't want to hear from anyone about what Mary Franzen's done. I don't want to hear about people talking about what they think Donald Trump. This is not a both sidesism discussion. The only aspect of the both sidesism that I'm only slightly willing to entertain is that both political parties have had problems with candidates, there being a lack of vetting related to candidates. That's the only situation that I think is applicable here. But Mary Franzen has done absolutely nothing politically or in any aspect of her life to have to deal with what she's been dealing with Judd Hoff. And she does not deserve him as a legislative candidate. She does not deserve anything that she's endured. And I will also say that if there is a Republican who was endorsed and did this type of stuff, I'd be saying the same thing about the Democrat, because this is not a partisan issue. This is about right versus wrong.
Completely. And it would even be a conversation to be had if it wasn't from the DFL candidate against Franzen. It would be inappropriate if it was Joe Smith, who's just a constituent, a random person who has done these things against Franzen. It is she, like you mentioned, she has been elected. She has served for 14 years now. She has done great things, whether you agree with her policy or not. She got elected by 40 to get 70% of the vote. She clearly, the voters in her district are clearly supportive of what she is doing to represent them. And this is just absolutely unacceptable.
Yes. And again, I'm trying to explain a little bit because most of our listeners don't know everyone that serves in the legislature like we do. So I wanted to give some general kind of biographical information. But to be honest with you, I was even a bit shy about discussing that because I'm not trying to justify it in any way. And explaining who Mary Franzen is and the type of legislator she is might make people think maybe she deserves this. Maybe she's done something to deserve this. There ain't a damn thing that Mary Franzen has ever done in her life to warrant this type of behavior. And the statement begins and ends there. This is wrong. She doesn't deserve this. No candidate deserves this. No legislator in either part of the aisle deserves this type of behavior, which we're going to describe, which is that it's very clear based on videos that Judd Hoff has posted himself, that this is a man who has gotten dangerously close in multiple situations to Representative Franzen. When I saw this video, I saw this video online and I learned more about Judd Hoff. I told someone that this is without a doubt one of the craziest, if not the most disturbing videos I've ever seen involving a legislative candidate involved in the realm of politics. This is just terrifying. What Judd Hoff posted, and we'll put this link in the video, is that at some point he went through Mary Franzen's trash. Now, let's describe again the geography. Mary Franzen lives in Alexandria. She's lived in Alexandria since she's been in the legislature. Guess who decided to move into Mary Franzen's neighborhood? Right across the street. Judd Hoff did. So Judd Hoff had previously protested near and around Representative Franzen's house. He knew where she lived. At some point in the last few years, Judd Hoff decided to get a house. and he picked the house right across the street from Mary Franzen. So you have a guy who has harassed Mary Franzen in the past, who has targeted Mary Franzen in the past, decides to then move across the street from Representative Franzen. And right across the street, she looks out her driveway. She's staring at his property. She stares at his property. This is the man who's, and so what Judd Hoff has done to take advantage of that proximity is he's apparently dug through her trash. We know that he's dug through his trash because he's posted about it on social media. He has gone through Representative Franzen's trash. He has taken items out of the trash. He has then saved them. And he's then done videos about the material that he's posted, the material that he's collected from her trash. In fact, he posted a video. He posted on November 15th, 2023. Judd Hoff is calling a fellow state representative of Representative Franzen. And the whole purpose of the phone call to the office is what? Judd Hoff found what he claims was an unopened card in Representative Franzen's trash. He called this legislator to let them know that he had opened the mail, and he was calling them to let them know that Representative Franzen had gotten this card from her trash. He then opened the mail, and he was calling on the 2-year anniversary of it. So let's just slow down for a second, understand what he did here. It appears, based on the video, that 2 years prior, Judd Hoff had gone and somehow gotten access to Mary Franzen's trash. Either it was a trash can at the end of her driveway or some other place he had gotten access to her trash. He found a card that a fellow legislator had sent to Representative Franzen. He claimed the card was unopened. Judd opened the card and then kept it. Either he kept it for 2 years or he opened it after 2 years. But the whole point of this call 2 years later was to call this legislator and to say that it was the anniversary of when he had gotten this card. And he was calling to let this legislator know that Franzen had not opened the card. And guess where this card was now? He says on the card that it was now on his fridge. Where's the fridge? It's across the street from Mary Franzen's house. Let's just sit and talk about that for a second. He went and he kept the card that he found in the trash, like some trophy, like some souvenir. There's other examples of where he has gone through the trash and he's posted Mary Franzen's cell phone number online very gleefully. This is a massively disturbing situation. And as I said, this is incredibly concerning. I have never seen this level of dedication to targeting an individual in my entire life. And again, this has everything to do with Mary Franzen, but also nothing to do with her, because she is the target of this. Everyone who's listening to this does need to be concerned about the safety and welfare of Representative Mary Franzen, but it also has nothing to do with her, and that she did absolutely nothing to deserve this. And I am just appalled. It was disturbing to watch. It was disturbing to see the gleefulness that this man had, the dedication he had to the bit, that he went through someone's trash. Now, you are the resident legal advisor to the podcast. I do believe that it is legal, depending on where the trash is, to go through it in the state of Minnesota. Have you ever dumpster dived?
I have not. Although I will say there are some interesting TikToks out of there of the actual dumpster diving, like behind stores and stuff, and the things people get and sell, like what stores throw out, and it's a whole wild thing. But in this situation, sounds like that the garbage was at the curb and he went through it, which from my understanding is technically, again, legal, but is it ethical, moral? No.
You're not going to ask me if I ever dumpster dived?
Have you ever dumpster dive?
Now, I worked a lot in opposition research over the years. When people think of the word opposition research, they think of the raw political stuff. I haven't done that in the longest time. But there's other type of research that I do. So when people think of the opposition researcher, that's years and years ago. But even then, when I was doing that type of opposition research, you know what I've never done before? Dug through trash of anyone else. The last time I dug through trash, where there was a belief that my daughter threw a retainer in it, and we were out there, she'd lost it in the snow, and there was a possibility that it maybe ended up in the trash. The last place you're going to find me ever digging is in someone's trash, absent me looking for a retainer that my kid may have thrown away mistakenly, which was actually lying in the snow, which was pretty difficult to find. Dumpster diving, going through trash at the end of the driveway, by my understanding, is legally permissible. That being said, as someone who's worked extensively in opposition research, which is generally, I think, the first place that people think this type of dumpster diving happens, I have never dumpster dived. I've never gone through someone's trash. The only trash again I've ever gone through is my own. It's not the part of the trade. If that makes me years ago a bad opposition researcher because I didn't go through people's trash, I have to have standards. I've never gone through someone's trash other than my own. Are you
Well,
surprised that I've never dumpster dived?
I didn't ever, I hadn't really thought about it until this moment, but when you talk about the opposition research that you've done in the past, maybe it would have fallen under that, but no, bravo, congratulations, no dumpster diving, duo here.
Correct. But let's just say for a second that, again, just like the qualifications, Judd meets the legal qualifications. But the criminal record, coupled with the extent of the criminal record, coupled with the lack of contrition that I'm aware of, he should not have been endorsed. Then you add in the videos that are publicly available online. This isn't any type of sleuthing that was done. This is his identified YouTube account. He is posting videos like this. He is posting videos of him gleefully calling a fellow legislator and boasting about the fact that he had dug through Representative Franzen's garbage and that he had found this card and he had memorialized it and remembered it. And his dedication to it was to keep that for 2 years. And it's now on the fridge inside his house. Do you have any idea how scary that is, how disturbing that is, and how threatening that is?
Huge violation in so many ways. And again, this isn't something that was done. He's posting about these, what you said, November 2023. That's what, 6-7 months
Less than
ago.
a year ago.
This is something that is not, maybe the digging through happened 2 years ago, but he's obviously very proud of it, has this medal on his chest that he's bragging about. And it's just very clear it's still a part of who he is and what he stands for. And it's really unfortunate that he was endorsed by that DFL man.
Yes, and I want to read you just a little transcript of the video that I posted. What he says on the phone when he calls this fellow legislator's office. I just wanted you to know that she threw that beautiful greeting card in the garbage and didn't even open it 2 years ago. And I'm calling you because it's the second anniversary of when I found it in the garbage. So I wrote, to recap, according to Hoff, he dug through Franzen's garbage and found an unopened card. He kept the card for 2 years and then opened it. He then put the card on his refrigerator at home, which is across the street from Franzen's home in Alexandria. This is so disturbing. This is so disturbing. And I do not want this. I want to have a very limited conversation about Mary Franzen in the sense of this. She does not deserve this. She is a human being. The only reason that I explained her partisan background and who she is to explain a little bit of the dynamics that are going on here for our listeners. But it's absolutely irrelevant who Mary Franzen is. It doesn't matter how she votes, what type of person she is, what party she identifies with. She doesn't deserve this. No legislator deserves this. And to think that there is a possibility that this guy stays endorsed and that Judd Hoff is going to be, that the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce or some Chamber of Commerce is going to have a debate where Representative Franzen is going to be forced to be on stage with the individual who has acted in this type of way is simply appalling. And again, it's important to describe the background of what's going on here, but who Mary Franzen is doesn't matter. She's a human being and she doesn't deserve this. No one deserves this. No one deserves this level of treatment.
So I think that you really helped uncover or bring forward a lot of these troubling items. I do want to mention that the DFL chair, Ken Martin, did put out a statement after this. There were some multiple calls for that to happen. He said the kind of violent and threatening behaviors that Mr. Hoff has engaged in have no place in the Minnesota DFL party. We strongly disavow this endorsement, and I've asked the local party unit in question to withdraw their endorsement immediately. He goes on to say that they're not going to spend money or resources supporting this and condone that kind of behavior. That is something that was glad to see. It happened relatively quickly. We've talked a lot about how these kind of things shouldn't come from a partisan lens. We should all strive to stand up and stand against any sort of violence or attacks against electeds or candidates. And when somebody like this, these elected officials are supposed to be held to a higher standard. We want them to be people that are the best people to be representing their districts and to have people look up to and look to do things. And so I do applaud Ken Martin's quick move to call for that.
It was a very good statement. And I think we should separate a couple things here. Martin did a great job with that statement. And political parties, this is obviously a political discussion in the sense that this is a political podcast and we're discussing it. So we're obviously going to discuss the political elements of this. I think Ken Martin's statement was perfect. Both political parties are major political parties in the state, but they have local parties all across the state. They are run all across the state. There are 120 some party units, I think, in both political parties in some ways. And those are locally run parties. And so it's not as if Ken Martin and the DFL sat down and said, I want Judd Hoff to run for this district. It was a local decision made by local activists in 12B up in that area. But for the fact that Ken Martin went out and made that statement, that's not a small thing for him to do because he's calling out his own party. And that's what a responsible party does in this situation. So my hat's off to Ken Martin for giving the exact type of statement that needed to be made. He didn't engage in both sidesism. He left it specific to this situation, and the leadership and staff of the state party at the DFL state party should be complimented for what they did. I also will say that the chairman of the Republican Party issued a statement on this, and his statement was not wrong calling this out. And so there is, on both sides, there has been concern that has been raised. And I think the messaging on the large part on both sides of the aisle on this has been very responsible. Let me also just raise one other point. You know who hasn't spoken out that I'm aware of is anyone from the House DFL. Again, if Judd Hoff is elected, which is incredibly unlikely, he will serve in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and I assume he will caucus with the DFL. I have not heard any definitive statement by anyone from the DFL House caucus disavowing this man and saying that he is not qualified to serve in that legislative body and he would not be welcomed in that legislative body. Again, this is a part of the state that is difficult for Democrats to win. There are parts of the state that are difficult for Republicans to win. And in a lot of those situations, I know, having worked at the party, what you look for is like names on the ballot. You want to make sure that there is someone running carrying the banner. That's the kind of balance that you need to do. But you just can't throw anybody up. And I think in this particular instance, I think the chairman of the DFL has responsibly messaged on this. I think the chairman of the GOP party has responsibly messaged on this. I think everyone has responsibly messaged on what needs to be done. And what's missing, I think, is a more vocal voice at the local level. And the other thing that I think is missing is someone from the House DFL just saying, we're not going to engage in this type of stuff.
Absolutely. There's only so much the House can't rescind that endorsement. That has to come from the local party themselves. But they could, very similar to Chair Martin, say, we're not spending time and energy on this. They're not going to be on any sample ballots, anything of that sort. And really, it's surprising to me the House hasn't come out and done this because there is plenty of time before filing deadline, right? Like, they could still get somebody else. Yes, it would be somebody else that, if they don't rescind the endorsement, would be up against a DFL candidate. But there's time for that. I hope that they come out. I hope this happens, but it's beyond troubling. He should not be a candidate for anything, and it's very concerning and very troubling. And the only good that we have about this is that Mary Franzen is likely to still win in a landslide.
Do you want to read the quote, I think, from the chair of the Minneapolis DFL?
Yes, this was one so another local party chair, Minneapolis DFL, Brianna Rose Lee, posted, I want all women in politics to feel safe in their own homes. Harassing anybody by going through their trash to call people they know is unhinged. Moving next door is next level. This isn't about political ideology. All women should feel safe to be active politically. Bravo. This is a great way, again, not something that she needed to step into, but something that she felt compelled and strongly about speaking out against. And I think it's just a really great way, again, to condemn the situation that's going on. And yeah, I thought it was great.
I thought it was a really good statement. And it's one of the things that we try to do on this podcast is even when we're being critical is also focus on the good. I think there was a lot of good that came out this week in response to what's being done here and the behavior of this individual towards Representative Franzen. I think there were strong voices in the Republican Party that raised concerns and in the Democratic Party that raised concerns. The long-term problem that we have here is what's going to happen to Judd Huff's candidacy. Chairman Martin, I think very similar to Chairman Hand, can't just undo an endorsement. The local Democrats are going to have to unring the spell because I think it appears based on published reports, there was a level of some transparency. I don't know what the level of transparency was on his legal record, but it appears that there was some deficiency in the sharing of some of his online activity in terms of some of the behavior that he has done directly towards Representative Franzen. And it is incredibly disturbing. And Becky, again, I think about one of the subjects that we've talked about is getting more women to run for office. And that's what I think that Brianna Rose Lee's statement, the chair of the DFL, just again, a perfect message. And that's the type of thoughtfulness. That's what's, I think, so frustrating in this situation is we're discussing such an ugly, grotesque situation that was made by a local party unit up in Douglas County. We obviously want to draw some attention to that and speak out against it. But it did bring out a lot of good from some people. And I think we've highlighted multiple examples of some people that were very quick, who didn't need to speak up about it, but that did a really good job of disavowing themselves and dissing themselves because of this behavior. But this problem hasn't been resolved because as of right now, I believe he is still the endorsed candidate. We're taping this on a Wednesday. He's still the endorsed candidate. I haven't seen any updates, and it's going to take some time to undo this. I think from a party apparatus standpoint, they're going to have to unendorse him. That's going to take some process if they go forward with that. I think that there is a likelihood that he runs in some way this election cycle against Representative Franzen, either with the DFL endorsement or without the DFL endorsement. I think it's unlikely that this guy is just going to go home, just going to take his ball and go home. But if he does take his ball and go home, guess where he lives? Right across the goddamn street from Mary Franzen.
You're right. We got to see how and if this can get wrong. In my experience, that would be something pretty difficult and timely with different requirements to convene delegates to make those decisions. And filing is a couple months away. So we will watch, we will give updates, and not okay, man. Not okay. But thank you. I think you should be commended for getting all of this information out there. There was a lot of different things I'm sure people were sharing with you and you were finding in your research. And I think it's a really important thing to do, and obviously was not done by a lot of other people involved in this. And I thank you for doing that and making sure that we stand out against this.
I appreciate it, Becky, and just want to say a couple of things in closing, and then we could close this section out. Mistakes happen. We have discussed other situations in both political parties where candidates can get endorsed, and clearly there's examples in both the Republican Party and the DFL Party now of proper vetting not being done. This is a very extreme example that sets it to the stratosphere, that makes it a very much more of a serious problem. But these type of circumstances could have happened in either political party. In this situation, it just happened in the DFL Party. Let me also just say in closing one last time, I don't care who Mary Franzen is. I don't care about her politics, how she votes, what party she represents. I don't care what issue she espouses. No legislator, male or female, in any political party, Democrat, Republican, or in any party, at the local, state, at any level, deserves this level of treatment. It is horrific. It is appalling. It is scary. And if you can't find a way to speak up about this, God help you, because this is the easiest situation to speak out about. And if you can't speak out because you don't like Representative Franzen's vote, I don't give a frog's fat ass. There's never been an easier situation for someone to go out and say, this is wrong. This is wrong. And if you haven't spoken out yet about this and you have a role, you should be doing it because nobody deserves this.
I concur. Let's leave it at that.
All right. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
We want to thank you for listening to The Breakdown with Broadcorp and Becky. And before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on the platform where you listen. You can leave a review or give us a shout out on our website or across all social media platforms at BB BreakPod. The Breakdown with Brodko and Becky will return next week. Thank you again for listening.